Today, we're going to take a look at 5 of the hottest picks in FPL right now. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today we're going to take a look at 5 of the hottest possible transfers ahead of Game Week 24 and beyond. Now, first things first, I'm not going to mention Man City players today, not because I don't think they're great, but if anything, they're just becoming so obvious as picks. And also, the second main reason is I'm recording this on Monday morning, so I'm recording it before Man City go up against Brentford, and who knows what's going to happen in that match. Players could go off injured, new players could come to the fore, so I want to save all the Man City chat for later on in another video this game week. Aside from that, the first player I'm obviously going to want to mention is Richarlison. Another 2 goals against his old club Everton over the weekend makes it 9 goals in 8 games for the Spurs' main man at the moment. He is registered, as we know, as a midfielder in FPL, playing out of position in that number 9 role for a side that are creating bundles of chances for him right now. He's in the form of his life, and I think a lot of people are still underestimating Richarlison based on what we've seen over the last couple of seasons, probably since he basically signed for Spurs. Now, prior to that, in a struggling Everton side, he was scoring a decent amount of goals, and it looks like now that he's got his fitness up to scratch, he's sorted out a lot of the off-the-pitch stuff as well. He is absolutely flying for Spurs right now, and like I said, they're creating chances after chances for him, so I don't really see any reason that this is going to slow down anytime soon. Spurs have also had their own injury doubts, and obviously Son off at the Asia Cup, and he'll be back soon. I don't think that really impacts Richarlison negatively, considering how well he's playing. I think he holds down his spot in that number 9 role, and I think Timo Werner is going to be the likely one who's going to get his minutes majorly reduced when Son returns. It is also important to note that the next 2 games are looking pretty good, especially that Brighton at home game. We know that Brighton concede quite a lot of chances, and I can kind of pinpoint that game as a very high scoring clash. So again, I think Richarlison in Game Week 24 and beyond is looking very, very good. The reason a lot of managers aren't piling in on him at the moment, and it is a big asterisk on him, is the fact that Game Week 26 will be a blank for Spurs. That Chelsea versus Spurs game has been postponed. It will be played later on in the season, it looks like. And obviously that's going to be something that we need to navigate if you're considering Spurs or Chelsea assets. I think with the way Richarlison's playing at the moment, even with a couple of games left before that blank, he's probably still worth the transfer in. And then even if you need to hit him out in Game Week 26, he will probably have repaid that -4 hit in that time. Now, also, if you can just bench him in Game Week 26, maybe sell a Liverpool player or 2, maybe sell your Chelsea players, again, he might just be a player you can hold on to on your bench in Game Week 26. And I think over the run, he's probably going to be worth it. So I think Richarlison is going to be a hot topic yet again this week, and I see no reason why it's going to slow down for him anytime soon. The defender that's going to be stealing all the headlines ahead of Game Week 24, with good reason, is Kieran Trippier. Now, he will be bought by a lot of managers because the next 2 fixtures are looking really, really enticing. Nottingham Forest away, Bournemouth at home, great chance of returns in both of those games for Trippier. Scored his first goal of the season over the weekend in that 4-4 draw against Luton. So it's not just assist threat anymore. We are getting a little bit more goal threat from him. He is, of course, on some set pieces too, and you would expect at some point a free kick to go in. So I think the points are going to keep flowing for Trippier. The one issue that I can see coming on the horizon is that Game Week 26 fixture against Arsenal. Now, in most scenarios, one bad fixture in the next 5 wouldn't be a major problem. But because it's Game Week 26, when Spurs blank, Chelsea blank, Liverpool blank, we're going to have a lot of players that we're going to be holding on our benches that are blanking anyway. So if you're happy to start him against Arsenal away, I think he's an absolute fine buy for the next few game weeks. But just have in the back of your mind that you probably will need to start him in what is less than an ideal fixture against Arsenal. Over the run, though, 4 of the next 5 are looking pretty tasty. So Kieran Trippier is going to be a very popular pick this week and next. The other thing that I would like to note in terms of team structure is a lot of managers will only be able to get to Kieran Trippier if they sell Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, obviously, he did start against Arsenal, but came off after, I think, 57 minutes last night. So he's still building up his match fitness a little bit. But with another week before the Burnley at home clash for Trent, I would be very surprised if he didn't start getting 90 minutes again very soon. And that's obviously a great fixture for Trent. So selling Trent to get to Trippier, if we're confident that Trent doesn't get the start, if we think that he's still building up match fitness, then it makes perfect sense. But if we think Trent starts against Burnley and then doubles in game week 25, then that's going to be a pretty difficult switch to make. If you can fit in both, or if you've got neither at the moment, I think there's a really strong argument to favouring Kieran Trippier for the next run of games, especially because he's 1.6 million less than Trent, by the way, as well. So you can do more with that extra budget in your midfield, in your attack, maybe even having a triple City attack, for instance, to really attack that game week 25 double. All becomes slightly easier to do if you have a less expensive defence. And Trippier, whilst he is an expensive defender, he's not quite in the same echelon as Trent is. So I do understand it. He will be a very popular pick this week and next. So full steam ahead on Trippier if you fancy him ahead of the next run of fixtures. So Garnacho is going to be a really popular midfielder this week to bring in, and it's probably not just for the reasons you'd expect. Obviously, 2 goals and maximum bonus points against West Ham yesterday will mean that he's all of a sudden on a lot of people's radar, but that's not the only reason that Garnacho is going to be popular. The other reason, and the reason that I bought him in a few game weeks ago, is because he makes for a really good enabler in midfield. A lot of us are switching to a 3-4-3 strategy at the moment because there are a lot of strikers, especially with doubles in the next few weeks, that are going to be really popular. So having a 4-man midfield with a 5th midfielder who is starting games and has decent attacking threat, that is also crucially cheap, makes it a really viable strategy. So you've got an 8-man attacking force, and you can always bring in someone like Garnacho on the weeks where they have a good fixture. Now, as you can see on the fixture ticker below, the reason why that's going to be really interesting is that in game week 26, when again, a lot of teams will be blanking, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, all blanking, and there's a lot of popular midfielders that will be blanking, Garnacho has Fulham at home, which is a really tasty game. So having Garnacho just sat on your bench for a couple of game weeks before the Fulham fixture might not be a bad shout, because one, you can easily bury him on your bench because he's 4.8 million. You can still afford to have 7 other really strong attackers in your lineup. And Garnacho, because he's got decent enough attacking threat, if one of them gets injured, if one of them gets rotated, he's actually a really good enabler that you can bring off the bench and save having to make a transfer in your starting 11, because he can just come in, sit in the team for 1 game week, and then your player, if he gets rotated out, if he gets injured, hopefully is only out for 1 week, then you don't need to make that transfer and you don't need to push yourself down a path, because you've got this crucial cheap asset that is going to be able to fill in any given game week. Now, with Garnacho in mind, I think there are going to be more important midfielders to hop on in the next couple of game weeks with higher upside. But if you're able to make a double switch, or if you want to convert over to a 3-4-3 and you want to save money in one spot, Garnacho is going to be a really interesting option to enable other moves in your team. So another one of the hottest picks in FPL right now is actually a player that I think some people are going to disregard ahead of a really good couple of fixtures, and that's because he had a bit of a disappointing game yesterday against Arsenal. I think Liverpool were just generally not quite at it yesterday, but they are a phenomenal side. They've got incredible attacking upside, so I expect them to bounce back with a vengeance against Burnley at home in game week 24. Now, the reason I was actually quite happy that he didn't have a great game yesterday and Liverpool didn't is because I'm hoping his ownership stays relatively low and he isn't bought by quite as many managers as he would have been otherwise. He was on an incredible run of scoring and returning in FPL, and for him to actually get the blank might just put a little bit of cold water on the transfers in, but don't let that put you off. Diogo Jota has been phenomenal recently, and that Arsenal fixture is about as tough as it gets in the league. They've got the best statistical defence out of all teams at the moment in the Premier League, and they were playing away from home at the Emirates, so it was always going to be a tough fixture for them. But Burnley at home is about as good as it gets, and then they've got the double, including that Luton home game. So I think overall, I'm just hoping that people forget about Jota, they prioritise other midfielders, disregarding the fact that they've got great fixtures, hopefully he's still going to be nailed into the side, because we haven't at this point heard anything about Mo Salah still coming back to full fitness. So you'd think that as it stands, Diogo Jota is going to be pretty nailed into the side. And yes, it might be a fairly short-term punt right now with the game week 26 blank on the horizon, but I think the upside is definitely there that over the next 2 game weeks, including that double, I think the returns are coming, and I can see 2 big hauls in that next double. So I think overall, Jota is still going to be more than a fine pick, a fantastic pick. And I'm kind of glad, especially because he's not in my team, by the way, that he didn't have the best game against Arsenal, because maybe that puts off a few managers from bringing him in ahead of what is a great patch of fixtures for Liverpool. So the final player I wanted to mention briefly today is Matheus Cunha. And as you know, I like finishing off the videos with a little bit of a differential every now and then, just to give the video a bit of flavour and for you all to have something a bit different to think about. And Cunha is a player that will probably be mentioned by a few FPL content creators this week because of his breakout hat-trick against Chelsea. Obviously an incredibly impressive performance, but even before that day, even before the Chelsea game, he'd also been returning really well anyway. 12 returns in the season before the Chelsea game, obviously up to 15 now, including 9 goals. But the data is also looking really impressive. 0.37 XG per 90 for a player under 6 million is very, very good. And the fixtures over the next 3 or 4 are not looking bad at all. Obviously, they won't have the double in game week 25. But he is a player that, because he's fairly cheap, you might be able to just store him on your bench in 25. And then he's got a great fixture in game week 26 against Sheffield United. Again, when a lot of other players will be blanking, you can rely on Cunha to have probably a really good chance of return against Sheffield United. So over the next 5, I think he's going to be a great buy. The data's looking good. And of course, he could be cheap enough that he could be your 8th attacker. You don't need to necessarily play him every single week. Now, I don't think the Chelsea performance is a flash in the pan. I think it's going to be fairly consistent returns for him between now and the end of the season, mainly also because when you look at the underlying data over the last 3 or 4, in 3 of the last 4 games, he's got an XG of over 0.94 in each of those games. So the data's increasing week on week at the moment. He's looking very good with the eye test, and Wolves are also scoring a lot more goals than we're used to seeing them score week in, week out. Wang Hee-chan is coming back in fairly soon as well, so maybe there's a little bit more competition for places, but with the way Cunha's playing, I'd be very surprised if he did lose his spot. And with people like Pedro Neto coming back into the side and getting back up to full fitness, I think Cunha is going to benefit from that and just get more and more chances in open play as well. So for the price, considering he's this much of a differential and considering that game week 26 fixture when a lot of other players will be blanking, I think Cunha could be a really sneaky differential that could help you rise up the ranks over the next few game weeks. So that wraps up the 5 picks that I'd be highly considering in my FPL team ahead of game week 24 and beyond. There are loads of other players to talk about though, so as always, if there are any players that you want me to discuss, do leave them in the comments below and we can have a chat about it before we hit the game week 24 deadline. In the meantime, if you've stuck around this long, please do feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed the content. It really does go a long way to supporting the channel, and I'll see you later on this week as we take a look at my team selection ahead of game week 24.